Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Mueller, and this report on social engineering is for my class at the University of Detroit Mercy. It is the Cyber Defense Operations class, and my instructor is Dr. Ann Conkey. In this presentation, I will be explaining why am I doing this for the Detroit Mercy Service Learning Institute, and then I will be discussing why social engineering is important, the different threat actors, a structure of social engineering, a model, and an example. Then I will be using that example in a social engineering detection model, and then I will have my references at the end. So the Service Learning Institute at the University of Detroit Mercy, they have 5 to 25 hours of community service that are associated with various courses. These courses can be service course opportunities can be on campus or virtual service opportunities. They are done in addition to the class, and they are a way to apply what you have learned in the class in the coordination with the Jesuit Mercy traditions of the University of Detroit Mercy. The first question to ask for social engineering is, why is it important? Well, the human is the weakest link in cybersecurity. Hackers know this, and they will try to exploit this in any way possible. And the end result of this is that the overwhelming majority of attacks use social engineering in at least some form. Since most cyber attacks use social engineering, if the ordinary user understands social engineering, they will be able to better defend against the majority of cybersecurity attacks. So first are the different threat actors. This is important to know because each threat actor has a different goal, and depending on the goal of an threat actor, it will determine the method in which he goes about his attack. So first is the script kiddie. This is a hacker that is maybe not as well versed as the other hackers. He is just trying to make a quick dollar, or is doing it for fun, or is trying to learn more about hacking. Then there is the hacktivist, which is doing the hacking for a specific cause. For example, if a group does not like the oil industry, they might do an attack against an oil company and try to cause harm to that company. Then there is organized crime, which you can relate to Al Capone and his big network of crime. They are very organized, they have lots of resources, and they are able to carry out some complex attacks. And finally, there is the nation state threat actor. This might be an example, would be North Korean hackers acting in the interests of North Korea, or Russian hackers trying to interfere with a political event. So first, in a social engineering attack, it is important to understand the structure of how it works and the different pieces that go into it. So the first part of the structure is the orchestration. So there is a form of targeting that the social engineer has to use. So he can choose to either use explicit targeting, where he crafts an attack for a specific person, a specific user, and a specific purpose. He chooses a small group and has a very specific attack that is directed at them. Say, for example, a human resources department, or a specific person in the human resources department, and then he was able to get information about that specific person and then craft his attack. Or there is promiscuous targeting, where the attack may be crafted for a group of people. So for example, maybe an entire company or an entire school is what the hacker is, and the social engineer is trying to exploit. Then there is technical or local attacks. Yes, an attack can quite possibly come through uses of email, but it can also come in a physical form. Somebody can try to walk into a building as well. Then there is the exploitation phase of a social engineering attack. So in every social engineering attack utilizes a deception vector. So this is the way that a user is deceived into complying with a request that a social engineer would make. So for example, in a cosmetic attack, a hacker might use something like the Instagram logo or the Facebook logo to allow a user to associate and feel comfortable with the logo. Say, for example, there's a pop-up that comes in the form of the Instagram logo. The user recognizes the Instagram logo, and then there is a level of trust because they recognize that Instagram logo. It is not a legitimate thing, but the user is deceived because he thinks it looks like the Instagram logo. In addition, there is also a behavior type deception vector. So a user may select the YouTube icon, and then the app may take the user to YouTube, and the user is then able to view whatever video he is looking for. However, then in the background, there is another process that is going on unbeknownst to the user that is carrying out a malicious action. The user has a difficult time detecting it because the computer or device or person is behaving in a way that he would expect. And a hacker may use either one of these methods or both of these methods. And finally is the execution phase. Once the attacker has craftily designed his attack, then he must then decide how long does the attack persist? How long does he continue to move forward with his attack? Does he have enough information? Does he need to craft a new type of attack to continue his success? All of these are important to understand because the hacker he has a specific goal and he needs to achieve that goal before he either decides to terminate the attack or to move on with the attack. Then a social engineer may also use a single step or a multi-step attack. The single step attack, he might only have one action that is important and that he is successfully able to exploit, or he might have multiple steps. Perhaps he needs to first get into a door, then he needs to gain access with a key card, and then he would need another key in order to get into a more secure room. Something like that would be an example of a multi-step attack. Now, in this model, we have the ontological model of a social engineering attack. A social engineering attack needs all of these pieces in order to be successful. So first of all, a social engineer needs a target. It can be either an individual or an organization. The social engineer can also be an individual or group. Then for every social engineering attack, there needs to be a goal. What is the social engineer trying to accomplish? It could be financial gain or unauthorized access or a service disruption. So once the social engineer has determined his target and his goal, then he can begin crafting and building his attack. Now, one of the very important aspects of a social engineering attack is the compliance principle. This is how a social engineer convinces his target that this target needs to comply with his request. So think of one is an authority figure where the social engineer says, I am an authority figure, you must listen to me or there will be consequences. This then intimidates his target, and then the target then, even though he may feel uncomfortable with the situation because he believes that social engineer to be a person in authority, he complies with the request even though he may feel uncomfortable or have doubts about it. Other compliance principles are friendship or liking. A social engineer may try to develop a commonality or build a relationship. For example, if the social engineer can determine that you are into cars. He may try to develop an association or build a relationship and say, oh, I have this type of car, to try to initiate a conversation and make the user feel, or the victim feel, more comfortable. Then there is commitment or consistency, which would be, oh, everyone else is doing it, or I have 100 people have benefited from this, you should too, to try to, that herd mentality of everyone moving forward, so you should too. Then there is scarcity. What isn't only in social engineer with malicious, also sales does this. Only 5 offers left at this great deal. Buy now before it's too late. This is a social engineering technique of trying to force the victim to move quicker than he normally would because of the sense of scarcity. And there's reciprocity. I have done this for you, now you must do something for me. That is also a important social engineering compliance principle. And then there's social validation. Normally a victim does not want to be embarrassed or risk having everyone see their mistake, or they want to have everyone in the public to have a positive view of them. The social engineer will try to make that person uncomfortable and feel as though they must do this thing that the social engineer is asking them to do so that they can maintain their social status. And here we will be looking at an example social engineering attack to see exactly how a social engineer was able to do his attack. So the first step would be the social engineer pretends to be someone who works on the management floor and convinces a cleaner of his supposed role. So here we can see in this ontological model that the social engineer has made his target an organization. He is an individual, and his compliance principle is authority. He is a manager, and he is convincing a cleaner of his supposed role. So then he needs the cleaner to grant him access. He convinces the cleaner of his authority. So the cleaner then grants the social engineer access to the building, allowing the social engineer to gain physical access to the computerized terminals on the management floor. So we see this was the goal of the social engineer. He wanted unauthorized access to these computers. Now, an important part of this attack was that the social engineer pretended to be part of the organization. He dressed in the appropriate attire and then was able to walk in the building with this cleaner, and this is a very dangerous type of social engineering attack. This is very difficult to prevent because people generally feel compelled to open the door for other individuals. So this social engineer, he looked the part, and he was able to have convince the cleaner that he was someone in authority. This cleaner did not want to challenge anyone in authority, so he gave that social engineer access by holding the door open. The social engineer, he was also able to use fake credentials or even just a good story to gain access to this organization. He can do this in a variety of ways: printing fake business cards, dressing the part, or carrying the correct security badge. All of these are ways that the social engineer can deceive in this case, the cleaner, into thinking he is a manager and that he should be given access to the system. And finally, there is also a medium of a social engineering attack. In this example attack, it was a face-to-face attack, but it can also be in technical formats such as email, telephone, text message, so on and so forth. And finally, once one understands the different steps of a social engineering attack, they're then able to use a social engineering attack detection model. Now, this model is useful to helping a user to understand if they should either comply with the request or defer the request off to someone else. So if the start of this detection model is if one understands what is being requested, then it is possible to move on to if they understand or are capable or have the authority to perform the request. If that person does not, if you do not have that authority or are not capable of performing that request, then that request should be deferred off to someone else. But if the user is able to comply with the request, then the user can ask, is this information public information, or is it a request that has been pre-approved to avoid a life-threatening emergency? If either one of these statements is true, then it is safe to perform the request because there would be no sensitive information that would be divulged. Then if these conditions are not true, then these questions should be asked. Are there administrative reasons for refusal or procedural reasons? Is this request one that is expected, or is it unusual? Or is there any other reason for being uncomfortable about the situation, or anything interesting about the request that would lead one to believe it is malicious? However, if there are no conditions for refusal, then it is very important to verify that person's identity. If it is a social engineer, then that social engineer will have to have crafted a specific way for the user to verify his identity. Then, as part of the verification process, can the authority level be verified? Can the credibility be verified? Also, if the user already has had previous interaction with that person, then they already can know if that person is actually who they say they are, or if it is someone else claiming to be that person, or if the user is aware that that person exists. If none of these clauses are true, then it is very likely that the person is a social engineer and that their request should be deferred off to someone else. But however, if there are verification requirements met, then can the user verify who that person is? Are they through a third-party source? Is there evidence that that person is who they say they are? And then finally, does the requester, do you have the necessary authority to comply with that request? If all of these steps are fulfilled and there are ways you have the authority to do so, and the identity of that person if it is either a social engineer or a legitimate person, then if that person's identity can be verified and there is no reason for that request to be refused, then it would be possible to perform the request with safety. Now, this model is only an example of what a social engineering attack may look like. There are many different forms that a social engineering attack may take, and if at any point you feel that you are interacting with a social engineer, you should end or terminate that relationship immediately. This model is only meant to be used as a guide of how many social engineering attacks might look like, but there are certainly many other ways that social engineering attacks may take the form of. If you would like to contact me, you may connect or message me on LinkedIn. If you send me a LinkedIn message, please mention that you got my LinkedIn profile from this presentation, or you can contact Dr. Ann Conkey at her school email address. This presentation was adapted from these various sources, including the ontological model and the social engineering framework, which was adapted from Moten, and the structure of a social engineering attack was adapted from Hartfield.